If I had $1 for every time someone at work called me a natural leader, I'd probably have enough money to pay myself the raise they've been avoiding for 2 years. My name is Marcus Reed. Officially, I'm a senior operations analyst at Larkwell Logistics. Unofficially, I'm the guy who makes sure the supply chain doesn't collapse every time someone in upper management drops the ball. I train the new hires. I manage crisis calls when systems go down at 2 a.m. I put together backup plans before people even realize the original ones are falling apart. But I never got the credit. Not the real kind. Just the sweet, shiny praise that sounds like recognition but feels more like a substitute for a raise, a title, or even just an ounce of actual power. You're so valuable, Marcus. Every manager loves having someone like me, quiet, competent, no drama. Lori, my manager, used to smile and say things like, "Marcus, you're the glue of this team." I honestly don't know how we'd function without you. You don't need a title, everyone already knows you're the leader. I used to believe it. I thought, if I keep showing up, keep being dependable, someone will notice. Someone will do the right thing. But here's what I learned, being useful isn't the same as being valued. The weight of unseen work. I once took over a struggling project mid-quarter after the assigned lead bailed unexpectedly. I restructured the entire delivery pipeline, coordinated across 4 departments, and got the client to renew their contract after they'd already decided to walk away. Lori told me afterward. That was incredible. I don't know how you pulled it off. Seriously, you're leadership material. I nodded, smiled, went back to my desk, and kept the same title, the same paycheck, the same invisible status. The moment I snapped, quietly, the real breaking point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't public. It was an email. I just renegotiated a contract that saved the company $175,000 annually. I sent Lori the final draft, after weeks of late-night revisions and vendor calls. She replied, "Great work. I'll present this to the execs tomorrow." The next morning, I got looped in on a reply chain. "Fantastic deal, Lori. Really sharp thinking. No mention of me. Not even a CC. Like I hadn't written the whole thing." Later, I stopped by her office and said, calmly, "I'd like to talk about my role. I've been doing the work of a project lead, and then some. I think it's time that was reflected in my title and compensation." Lori blinked. "Marcus, titles complicate things. You know everyone already sees you as a leader, right? You're respected, trusted. Why mess with that dynamic? That dynamic. The one where I do the work, and she takes the credit. Where I carry the load, but don't get the authority. Where I lead, but only in silence." That was the last conversation I had as the quiet one. I walked out of her office feeling strangely clear. They had no intention of recognizing me, not really. Because I was too valuable exactly where I was. So that day, I stopped waiting. I stopped being flattered. And I started making a plan. Because if they weren't going to give me the title I'd already earned, then I'd build something better. With or without them. After that meeting with Lori, something shifted in me. Not rage. Not even disappointment. Just clarity. I finally saw the game for what it was. If you're too competent, they'll use you. If you're too quiet, they'll ignore you. And if you're both, they'll keep you exactly where you are. So I stopped playing the game by their rules. I didn't quit. I didn't storm out. I didn't even confront her again. What I did was far more dangerous. I became intentional. Document everything. First thing I did? I started tracking everything. Every vendor deal I initiated. Every cost-saving adjustment I implemented. Every crisis I resolved before it reached Lori's inbox. Every internal request from other teams that somehow landed on my desk. Each task, each timeline, each result. I built a private portfolio that painted the real picture of my role, not the one on my business card. I didn't do this to boast. I did it because I knew something Lori didn't. I wasn't going to ask for validation again. Next time, I'd walk in with options. Speak louder, without saying a word. Next, I stopped hiding behind Lori's shadow. When someone emailed her for clarification on a report I wrote, I replied directly. When a project team thanked her for solving a logistics issue I handled, I gently corrected the record. Actually, I stepped in to rework the scheduling after the vendor changes. Happy to walk you through it. No shade. No hostility. Just the truth. And slowly, it worked. People started skipping Lori. Started asking for me directly. Started recognizing what I'd always known. I was already doing the job. The crossroads opportunity. About a month later, something unexpected happened. One of our partners, Everway Freight, reached out after I helped untangle a cross-border shipment mess their team couldn't crack. Their VP of Ops, Sandra, messaged me directly on LinkedIn. Hey Marcus, your clarity and follow-through impressed the hell out of us. I don't know what your situation is at Larkwell, but if you're ever open to new challenges, let's talk. My heart stopped for a second. This wasn't just a compliment. It was an invitation. I didn't reply right away. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I wanted to finish what I started first. The last test. 2 weeks later, Lori hit another roadblock. One of our software rollouts failed mid-cycle, throwing off operations across 3 states. She panicked. Escalated. Then, finally, knocked on my cubicle. Marcus, can you help? You're the only one who really understands how this thing runs. I looked up. She was sweating. Nervous. I nodded. I fixed it again. And when she thanked me, I didn't smile. I didn't say just doing my job. I just said, you're welcome. Let me know when the company's ready to reflect that in writing. The conversation that didn't end the way she hoped. The following Monday, I walked into HR. Not to file a complaint. Not to whine. I handed them a printed folder, bullet-pointed metrics, testimonials, cross-functional impact summaries, and said, this is the job I've been doing. If there's a title and salary structure that aligns with it here, I'd love to continue contributing at that level. If not, I have other opportunities on the table. They were stunned. Because I wasn't asking. I was negotiating. Now the ball was in their court. I walked out of that room with something better than approval. I walked out with leverage. And that, I realized, is what leadership looks like. Not waiting. Not hoping. Not begging. But choosing your value. And daring them to match it. A week passed after I submitted that folder to HR. One long, quiet week. No update. No follow-up meeting. No, we're working on it email. Just silence. I wasn't surprised. Because the moment you stop being easy to ignore, the system doesn't know what to do with you. But while they stalled, I prepared. The outside offer. Sandra from Everway Freight didn't just send another message, she sent a formal offer. Director of Operational Strategy. Hybrid. Competitive salary. And most importantly, authority. Not just over projects, but over people, process, and outcomes. She even wrote, you won't have to fight to be heard here, Marcus. You'll be expected to lead. That hit hard. Because at Larkwell, being heard had always been a struggle. Being seen? Even harder. I stared at the offer for an hour that night. The internal move, or lack of one. On Friday afternoon, HR finally called me in. The meeting was awkward. Lori was there. So was someone from finance. They thanked me for my transparency and dedication. Then they offered me a new title, Operations Lead. No raise. No team. Just a fancier nameplate. I stared at the offer letter for exactly 3 seconds before sliding it back across the table. I've already received an external offer. One that matches my actual contribution and doesn't require me to fight for acknowledgement. Lori blinked. You didn't tell me you were interviewing. I looked her in the eye. You didn't tell me I was being passed over again. The fallout. I gave them 2 weeks' notice. I wasn't petty. I didn't gloat. I did my handover documents. I trained Louise, the junior analyst, to take over my day-to-day. And on my last day, I wrote one final internal note titled, "Don't wait to be called a leader." In it, I wrote, "Leadership isn't just about titles, but it is about recognition, growth, and trust. If your best people are doing more than they're paid for, and you're calling it humility, you're not leading. You're using." It was shared over 70 times internally. Luis printed it out and pinned it to his cubicle wall. The first day at Everway. I walked into my new office at Everway with my head high. Sandra greeted me like a peer. The whiteboard already had my name on it and the words, "Q4 Flow Rebuild, Marcus Lead." No shadow. No glass ceiling. No invisible leash around my neck. Just a clean desk, a clear mandate, and respect. What I learned. People love to tell you, you don't need a title to lead. But here's what they really mean. We're happy to let you lead, as long as we don't have to pay you like one. I stopped accepting that. I stopped asking for permission to matter. And now, I lead loudly. I lead publicly. And I lead in a place that actually puts the title where the work already is. 3 months into my new role at Everway Freight, I can finally breathe. No more meetings where I'm talked over. No more upward delegation. No more empty praise. Here, when I speak, people take notes. When I propose, people build. And when I succeed, people say, "Thank you, Marcus." Simple. Direct. Different. New roots, old habits. However, it took time to adjust. I realized I was over-explaining in meetings, a survival skill from Larkwell. Apologizing before I criticize. Checking for approvals I no longer need. Sandra noticed. "Marcus," she said one day over coffee, "we hired you to lead. You don't have to justify your leadership role here, just do it." That statement stuck with me. Because for a long time, I had to convince people that I belonged here. Now, I just had to believe it. The circle moment. One Thursday morning, I received a message on LinkedIn that stopped me in my tracks. "Hi Marcus. Hope you're well. We're reorganizing our leadership at Larkwell. Would you like to talk about coming back, maybe as a senior leader?" The message was from the new director of human resources. Lori had left 2 weeks earlier. I sat with that message for a long time. Not because I was tempted, but because it confirmed that I had made the right choice. They didn't see my value until I left. Now they're trying to rebuild with someone they think is replaceable. I typed a short message. "Hi. I appreciate the outreach. I found a place that recognized my leadership the first time I showed it, not the 100th time. I wish you success in your restructuring." I didn't hit send for 20 minutes. Then I did. And closed the tab. At Everway, I started mentoring 2 analysts, Eli and Maya. Smart. Driven. Underappreciated. I saw myself in both of them. So I told them from the start. You don't have to wait 3 years for someone to see you. Start taking notes now. Speak clearly. And if you're in a leadership role, say it out loud. Maya smiled. You seem like someone who learned that the hard way. I nodded. Exactly. So you don't have to. The final lesson. The first place that breaks your spirit isn't always the place that ultimately shapes your career. I gave Larkwell my loyalty, my late nights, my quiet contributions. And in return, they gave me a compliment without compensation. Now what? I give my energy to people who understand that leadership isn't a compliment, it's a commitment. And I will never trade my voice for a vague promise again. 6 months later, I had what most people would consider a dream setup. My team at Everway trusted me. Projects were executed with rhythm and purpose. The leadership invited me into strategy sessions not just for logistics but for vision. And this time, I wasn't fighting to lead. I was just leading. But the thing about achieving something you've always wanted is that it forces you to ask yourself, now that I'm here, what's next? The call I didn't expect. On a late Friday, when the office was quiet, Sandra stopped by my desk. She didn't sit down. She didn't speak first. You've built something special here, Marcus. But now we have a bigger challenge. We're expanding into Europe, and we need someone who can design operations from the ground up across time zones, languages, regulations. Then she said the words I didn't dare to think. We want you to be global CEO. You'll report directly to the COO. Total autonomy. Big mess. Big opportunity. I blinked. I just felt comfortable. But comfort was never my ultimate goal. The fear behind the excitement. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan and thought about everything I'd done. At Larkwell, I'd spent years trying to be noticed. At Everway, I'd built a reputation so strong that it became an opportunity. But this is a different level. And a different kind of risk. What if I'm not ready? What if I walk into chaos and fail? What if I miss the days when leadership meant knowing everyone's name? But what if this is exactly what I've been preparing for all along? A conversation with Maya. The next day, I took Maya, one of my ments, out for coffee. I told her about the offer. She laughed. Why are you so hesitant? I broke down. Because I finally have balance. I finally know what I'm doing. She looked at me and said, "You're the one who taught me that leaders don't just find peace and control. They find purpose in building things that never existed before." She was right. I'm not afraid of challenges. I'm afraid of going beyond what I've fought so hard to achieve. But if growth scares you, you're probably on the right track. On Monday, I walked into Sandra's office. I didn't procrastinate. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I just said, build it. I'm in. She smiled as if she'd been waiting for me to catch up. Good. You have 2 weeks to package it and 2 quarters to design something that no one has ever done before. Final reflection. Larkwell never gave me a title, but it forced me to give it to myself. Everway gave me that title, but I took it seriously. Now, I'm not just the guy who fixes things. I'm the guy who designs them. Not because I'm empowered. Because I finally stopped asking. Final thoughts, email means everything. 2 days before I left for Europe, I received an email from Luis, the junior analyst I had trained at Larkwell. "Marcus, I'm now leading my own team." This time I didn't wait. I presented my case. I used your old handover documents as evidence. Just wanted to say thank you. You showed me how to be seen. I read it 3 times. And finally, I allowed myself to smile. Because your title doesn't define you. But if you lead well enough, your legacy will.